What's up everyone, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're opening up the week here with the Bitcoin price chart, where we're going to have a look at a full recap of what's happened over the weekend and from Friday's analysis. I'll walk you through exactly how this fractal is playing out and how we have likely completed the first stage of Bitcoin sell-off and what we're looking for to take our first long trade here as we have now officially flipped bullish. So let's jump into the Bitcoin price chart and have a look at exactly what's going on here. So the first thing we spoke about on Friday is how we have likely just completed the A leg of this ABC correction, and that last time this played out was when Bitcoin had pierced through its previous all-time high set back in 2021, and that so far what we've seen in this entire structure was a micro version of the way the entire bull market and bear market from last cycle. And what's happening in today's price action is that we are performing a smaller version of the way things played out in these events here. Now, if we jump down on the smaller time frames, first thing we can see is that from Friday's video where we called our bottom, you can see that price has pretty much held and slightly bounced from these levels, however not strongly V-bottoming like we spoke about in our example here. Now you can see our example on the right side, which is back to that early 2024 period, which we keep referencing, and how price just V-bottomed straight out of this and then eventually came back and found support. And that today's price here on the left isn't mimicking that exactly. Now as far as the shorts that we took and the way price is playing out on the way down, it's been very, very similar in the way that we had all these moves, and you can watch the previous Bitcoin videos and the way we've traded this range. However, when it comes to finding bottoms in this range, it's been much more complicated. As you can see in this structure here, when we first found our initial bottom, it's much different to the way things played out here, and that there were the V bottoms and the throwbacks were much sharper. Here we had equal lows get set, whereas on the right side you see we didn't even come close to setting equal lows. However, the structure ended up remaining the same, and having a look at today's price, it's most likely things play out quite similar to the way they played out here, in which we could actually see Bitcoin roll over, come back and set some equal lows here. Now to see that a bit clearer, it could look a little something like this, which is just this moment in time here, and what we can see is that Bitcoin's kind of following very similar structure here in the way that it's moving and the way that it's found its way up here, and then it's most likely that Bitcoin reacts the way it did down here, same way it did in this region when we were finding our local bottoms to be quite different from our fractal. However, on a higher time frame point of view, it's most likely we are in this bottoming process and the next move out is up. It's just trying to find that bottom and letting price play out before we can actually get some confirmations on the way we think price is going to react. And what I mean by that is what we want to see is price shoot to that upside region here before we can eventually get that pullback and then look for some trade setups, like we did here where we had price shoot up and then eventually we could get some trade setups. But you can't set up for trades and take these longs until we see price initially shoot out, tell us which direction it wants to go for, and then snipe our entries. So right now what we are still waiting for is price to get into these levels. So it's likely before we actually end up getting this structure play out that we do a similar style correction like we did in this zone, where we actually come and retest the lows, and then we can see that push out and then go for it, which could look something a little bit like so. But in these times, the best thing to do is just to let price figure itself out, and then once we see confirmation, then we can act as traders and make money in a move like this. Another thing I've been having a look at is the POC, which is the highest average volume of orders being placed. And what you can see is that this red line where we actually ended up finding support is the POC zone for this entire range since early May. And that we have found support in this region on trend, which is likely two more confluent signals at the bottom is likely in around this region. It's just about letting price action develop first before we can actually see a bounce off this. Now, this is the most likely scenario that we see playing out here. However, I want to talk about a little bit more of a bearish scenario that still makes sense here. And what it refers to is the way that we've seen price play out here in our example on the right side. We can see price actually came down and found support in this region here. Now this region here on today's price chart is actually this little order block right in here. So that would call for Bitcoin to fall down to about that 99.5 to $100,000 region to find support. Now, on the off chance that this was to happen and play out, it would still not invalidate this structure, as this is the same area price did find support in our example here on the right side. However, this is something to be aware of, as there is a likelihood of it playing out to the way it actually played out in this region here, where we still have that one more push to go, where we could see price start to grind and chop from here and then eventually give us that flush. And then maybe down here, once we have that bottom, we can see that V bottom and structure develop. So right now, it's really just about sitting on our hands and waiting to see which scenario is going to play out. However, I think it's most likely that we have bottomed here, although it wouldn't surprise me to see that $99,500 level tapped before then getting back on track and pushing back to those local highs. So we are bullish on the market, which means we are looking to take long trades only. We're not interested in shorting right now. And that what we're waiting for is a setup to essentially play out here where we can take that long trade. And until we see that setup, we're just going to sit on our hands and let this market do what it has to do. However, looking at a lot of the altcoins, it's very likely that this is the bottom. And we'll cover more of this tomorrow in XRP's video. But a lot of things point to this here being the bottom for Bitcoin as far as the altcoins go and where they're sitting right now. Now, another thing I wanted to speak about briefly is the way sentiment is playing out in a moment like this. And what we've seen is Bitcoin come down for these lows. However, everywhere we're seeing on X, we're seeing bearish posting where we're seeing people calling for that dump and essentially the top to be in and price to dump. We're seeing examples from the same region that we're actually talking about. However, people calling for the cycle to be over and that this is the top and that we should shoot down to 60K from here. And here's just more examples of bearish technical analysis coming out talking about how it's most likely that the cycle is over here for Bitcoin, which I find quite funny because we've spoke about on a higher time frame how we think Bitcoin is far away from finding its top, and we still haven't seen any rotation into the altcoin market. And usually at the end of a cycle, like in 2017 and 2021, we see an altcoin rotation, which we still haven't seen yet. So the likelihood of any of this bear posting playing out and people saying that that's the top for Bitcoin and that things are going to fall down from here are highly unlikely. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because what you want to see in a moment like we have right now, where we're rejecting off the all-time high and seeing a bit of bearish price action, is you want to see people coming in with those bear posts talking about how things are going to go crashing and crumbling from here. And it's most likely that if Bitcoin does find support where it's at right now, if we push to the highs again and then reject, that in a moment like this, the bear posting is going to be extreme and it's going to scare most market participants out of the market. So again, confirming the belief that we are in something like this and the market isn't going to go crumbling and crashing and that it's over for crypto. So most likely, guys, we've either found our bottom here or there's just a little bit more to go and we'll end up finding our bottom down here, similar to the way we did on the right. Either way, this isn't the area to panic at and definitely not the region where you want to be looking for shorts. And the best thing you can do in a moment like this is just wait, let price play out, and let's see if we can get some setups. Anyways, guys, not a whole lot to touch on today after Friday's video, as the price action over the weekend has been pretty boring. We do see price grinding to the upside, but nothing convincing me here that things are playing out like they have on the right side, and then it's most likely we're going into a period like this where things just roll over a little bit, and then we can see that bottom formed and then price can play to what we're looking for here. And then it's most likely right now we're just in a situation where price has to develop and we could just roll over here, but then we could eventually get that push up and look for our longs. So I definitely wouldn't go panicking and selling all my spot positions, because right now the best thing you can do is try to see the higher time frame picture here and understand where we are in this cycle, and that it most likely will be a small period of boring consolidation and correction until we can actually see Bitcoin break out. And there will be a few fake out attempts potentially, especially when price gets back into these regions up here, which are these two blue lines are the old all-time high and the highest weekly close. So once we see price get up back into these regions, expect a FOMO. However, like we spoke about in our example, it is likely that that would just be the top of the B leg and that eventually we will go down and tap that C leg that we're looking for, which will most likely fall around that $100,000 region. But until then, guys, let's just see how price action plays out from here. We'll be back tomorrow for an XRP update video, because XRP is at a very interesting level right now. If you've caught recent XRP videos, you'll understand why. So still confident that flipping bullish on the market with price where it is at right now is the right call, and to be looking for longs is what we want to be doing. And until that happens, just keeping emotions in check and not getting spooked out by the market right now. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with the XRP update. If you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like down below. It helps a lot. And if you want to see any altcoins reviewed or some technical analysis done on certain altcoins, be sure to drop that below and I can do a specific video on them as well. As if you've caught the crypto portfolio video, you'll see that there's some coins we're much more bullish on than others, and how most likely a lot of the coins in this market, especially the altcoin market here, are only going to make it back to retraces. At only 20% of altcoins are likely to actually set new all-time highs when we do start to see things get exciting. But most of these coins, especially the older coins, are just going to go into retracement levels. So if you want me to analyze those coins for you with fundamentals as well as technical analysis, drop the coin down below in the comments and I can potentially make a video on that this week. Anyways guys, I'll catch you in tomorrow's XRP update.